thanks everybody for joining another cmBuilder user workshop. As you can see, our theme for this workshop is Toy Story, right? So, to infinite and beyond 2D with cmBuilder. Beyond 2D. Okay, cool. This was hard for me to understand. Yes, so thanks everybody for joining, and I'll leave this as a question for everybody to put out there on the chat. What is the movie that was a big part of your childhood, and why was it The Mask? Okay, you probably can find a correlation between The Mask and my personality, right? So let's let's go ahead with this. And okay, so the main topics today will be the terrain reference surfaces, right? So let's talk. We're gonna spend a good part of like our workshop today talking about this and showing how you guys can leverage this new tool that's gonna really improve how you can do the earthwork planning, right? So after that, we're gonna talk about massing multi-domain. It's been quite a like a requested feature that we finally was able to do it, and also can improve a lot for like the early stages of your planning when you don't have a 3D model and so on. Some updates related to partial editing, which is basically multiple people editing the same scenario at the same time. Tips and tricks, how to create night mode in cmBuilder, how to use our new resources for facade walls and buildings, and how to use units as inputs, right? In general notes, we're going to talk a little bit about what happened last week on our SitePlan Summit number 4, okay? So some housekeeping items over here. The recording of this session is going to be available in a few hours. You can check our previous workshops on YouTube. There's a lot of good things in there for you to watch and learn more about cmBuilder. So these sessions is how you go from like being like a beginner to intermediate user to being a power user, and also being updated with all the new stuff that we are creating every month. Okay, use the QA and chat for questions, but also to let us know what are your childhood movie preferences, and participate in the chat a lot because it's awesome when you do. Okay, so let's go ahead with our main topic here today. So terrain reference surfaces. This is a new tool that we created to help in several different use cases. And the main idea behind this tool is that you can create now surfaces in cmBuilder that will be driven by points, control points, that will generate these custom shapes. And you can use these shapes to assist you when you're creating your earthwork operations, right? So I'm going to go through some few steps of like how you can do this, and I'll show you how to use it quickly. Then I'm going to come back to the presentation to talk about use cases, right? Like where you're going to be using this tool, and you also can let us know if you have used it already, if like how is it working for you, and so on and so forth. Okay, so basically the idea here is that you will create a surface using points that you will create, add these points manually into your scenario, or you can import a CSV with points coming from, let's say, either a point cloud or a survey from a topography, kind of like total station, and so on. If you're importing a CSV that will contain those points, it's very important that you define the coordinate system that you're using, and that coordinate system is matching with whatever system the surveyor used to create that list of points. Okay. You can also use a geometry to trace that geometry and place points on top of that geometry. Like in this case over here, it's in one of the examples that I'm going to show today. You can import a model, position that model properly, right? So you should always confirm the positioning of your model along with drawings and making sure that everything is placed correctly, especially on the elevation aspect of it. And you can place these points to trace that geometry if you don't have a CSV to import, okay? Once you have that surface done, you will create cuts and fills using that surface as a reference. So you're gonna draw a shape and say, I wanna create a cut with this shape, but the bottom part of my cut will match that surface, right? So you will be able to create partial or complete cuts. Like in this case over here, this is going to be the main cut that we're going to create today. I could have created this in several different stages, right? Like one for the bulk excavation in this area here, and then one cut for the ramp, half of the ramp, and then the other cut for the other part of the ramp. Or I could do the whole thing in one single cut, right? And once you create that cut, you can define what is the offset values that you want that bottom surface to be from that surface. Like if you want to cut it like a little bit above, a little bit below, or exactly where the surface is. Make Keep in mind that you can also do fills towards those surfaces. So you can do cuts and fills using those surfaces as reference. And you can also create multiple of these surfaces and use them in your project for several different reasons, right? So one very interesting thing that I'm going to be using today as well is that these surfaces, once you create them, you can project their shape into your sketch. So this, I'll show you how to use that. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into this. Okay, I will create right now a very simple example of like how this tool will work, right? So this is a complete like new scenario. There's nothing in here, right? So I just created the set condition to clean up this area here. And now I have this flat-ish surface. Okay, so what I will do here first is to create a terrain reference surface. So I'm gonna hit plus over here, and then I will create terrain, this surface from points. Very soon, we will have also the option for you to create this from a surface that you have imported, right? So for now, you have to do your points manually, but very soon you're gonna have this option to do as a surface. So now this is gonna work very similar to the custom terrain tool, but the main difference here is that once I'm done with the surface, it will not change my terrain right away. I will create that to use as a reference, okay? So let's say that I will place a point over here, but I actually want this point to be lower, let's say minus 0.2, 0.72, and then this point over here is gonna be minus 1 in terms of elevation according to the sea level, and this point over here is gonna be minus 2, and this point over here is gonna be minus 2.5, okay? So I created all of these 4 points over here. As you can see, they're below the ground over there. And when I hit confirm, a surface will be created. The surface is already in here. It shows up hidden by default. And we're gonna adjust this where like once you create the surface, instead of like not giving you any feedback about what was created, you're gonna jump into the edit mode of the surface. But the surface is here, and I can even turn it on temporarily. And if I hide everything here in my view, let's hide this side condition too, you see that I have a surface over there that is not a flat surface, okay? So it has a slope over there going on. And now that I have that surface on the ground, I can go in and I can create a cut, and I will create a cut that is like smaller than that surface. And when I hit confirm, by default, the cut will show up cut to depth. But what I want to do right now is I want to change it to cut to surface. And by default, you have the cmBuilder default initial terrain, which is the terrain that was over here. And I have now my reference surface. So if I put this offset to 0, this cut will match the same elevation as that surface, as you guys can see over there, right? So this is a simple example of that. And as you can see, I don't need to create the cut as big as the surface. Like it will only use that surface as a reference, right? So, and actually I didn't test this, but let's see what happens if I create this cut away from the surface over there. Okay, so you see that since I'm using my surface as a reference and there is no surface area on this part over here, the cut is not going through that part. So it's ignoring the part that doesn't have a surface, right? Because that's what I'm using over here. But if I use the cmBuilder default and I created like an offset of 2, this will use the whole thing because it's using that main surface over there on the top. Okay, so this is the easy step of creating this, and we're gonna now understand how we're gonna use this in the real use cases. But just before I move forward, I want to show you that you also, if you keep your surface visible while you're doing this work, the surface by default is hidden, right? But if I keep it visible and I go into this cut and I edit the sketch, what I mentioned before is that you can now actually project, use the project function for the sketch tool. This is something that everybody should learn how to use the project tool because it really helps you work very fast and more efficiently. So use the project tool and you can actually select the surface and it will create the cut with the same shape of that surface. Okay, so but of course this will be more relevant if you created the surface in the way that you want, that properly will represent the shape that you want to cut. Cool. So as you can see, now we have a cut over there with a sloped bottom and it's controlled by those points. So if I measure the sea level elevation over here, we'll match the sea level elevation that I applied to those points in my surface. So 2.5, similar to 2.5 over there, 1, 2, and minus 0.772. Cool. So this is the simple instructions. Now let's go ahead and see. Oh, this is going to come back to the beginning of the time. Okay, and you're going to need to use Alt Tab for this. So what are the use cases that we're going to be using this, right? So the first one, it's probably not going to be used all the time, but I wanted to bring this as first, and then we're going to move on to like the actual cuts that you're going to be doing on your project. But the first one is to adjust the topography for Google Maps models, right? So as you know, the Google Maps models do not have a custom terrain tool available. So we will use these surfaces to match the elevation with known references. So if I go back over here into this project that is like the simple project from Revit, we will see that I have a model. Let me hide the terrain here. And I have a model that shows what is my existing surface of the topography of the terrain, and a model that will show like what is the cut that I want to do over there. So let's just pretend that this surface over here does not have the cut that is supposed to be done. Okay, so what I would do is I will create a surface now following the shape of this big one over here. So I can go in and I create a terrain surface from points, and I'm going to be tracing the existing topography that I have. So the amount of points that you're going to create is going to really depend on the shape of your terrain, basically, right? Because if I look at this terrain over here, and I can understand that there is like several slope changes and topography elevation changes all around, I'm going to try to trace them as much as I can, but also don't overdo it. You don't need to go crazy and create like a bunch of points. So I'm just gonna go ahead and add some points over here on kind of like the main areas that I want, maybe in the middle of the slope over here, right? And maybe one at the bottom, something like that. And then I'll just go ahead and add points very spaced from one another over here just so we can save some time. But if I were doing this in a real project, I will spend a little bit more like trying to understand what are the main changes of my topography that will actually impact my work. But I'm just gonna trace like especially around the cuts that I'm gonna have. I would add more points, around these areas, because then this will make sure that my quantity takeoffs will be more accurate, right? And the other areas that are not really on my project kind of like boundary, you don't really need to worry about them that much because they are going to be mainly for the background reference, so the background doesn't look very weird like in terms of the terrain. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and create my cuts over here, or my points, and then hit confirm. So now I have a surface over there, and I'm gonna name this surface as existing topography, existing topo. Cool. So now I have a surface that looks like my shape of my model over there. Cool. So with this surface, I can bring back my terrain. And like I mentioned in other workshops, it's always good for you to do the site condition of that area before you do your cuts. So because every time that you create a cut or like in your earthwork operation in an area that doesn't have a site condition, the program will need to create a site condition and then create the operation, right? And if you do that in several different locations in those site conditions, you're going to be doing 2 times the processing that is needed for you to create a cut. However, if you go and create like a site condition that encompasses everything that you need and you do all your operations over there within that area, the processing for the site condition only happens once, right? So it's better if you do that. So I already did my site condition over here for this whole area. So I'm gonna go ahead and create now a cut that will refer to that whole shape that I created over there. So if I go over here in my earthwork and I create a cut, I can, let me see if my topo is visible over here. Yes. So I can create a cut and I can start my cut anywhere and I could project the shape, right? So I'm going to project the shape just to make sure that I will take like the whole area that I used. And then I'm going to create a cut to surface and I'm going to trace the existing topo and make this offset as 0. And you will see that this whole thing now has been brought down to the same shape of my little thing over here. Okay. So this is a way for you to recreate the existing topography. And I use the model right now, but you could use a contour line drawings. You could use drawings that shows control points of topography and whatnot. And or you could use like your model. If you don't have any of these things, but you have the model, you could trace the area around your model to make sure that the terrain will match that model properly, and so on and so forth. This is something that you can use many references for. And of course, I don't want this cut to look like dirt because it's referring to like an existing condition. So I'm going to change the texture of my cuts. This is something that not a lot of people know, that you can change the texture of your cut to make it look like the map. So if I choose this map function over here, you see that the projected kind of like texture on your cuts will be the same as the map that you had before. But now this map has a terrain shape that is closer to the existing conditions of your map. Okay, so let me bring this guy over here. It's going to be easier. So this is one use case that you can use this to trace the topography existing to adjust the shape of Google Maps models. Next use case, create excavations from existing models. So I have a model here. Where is my model? This guy that contains like a shape that shows me like what is going to be the overall shape of that bulk excavation, right? So I will create a surface tracing that. So now I can like hide everything else and keep just my model in there. And I'm going to go ahead and create my surface from points. And then I'm going to start placing points on the elevations that will be relevant for me to create excavations, right? So just make sure that you're selecting the correct points, because if I place this on the wall over here and not on the ramp, it will be kind of like tracing the wall, not the ramp. That's quite obvious. So we can do that. And another, yeah, let me finish this part. This one is this part for the ramp is the most complex one. And so on. Ooh, okay, so I traced my ramp over there. You can see that the points are following the shape of the ramp. And then for my slabs over here, I can just like trace whatever I want. And I will follow that here, here, here. And since these points are all in the same elevation, it looks like it, I don't need to place a lot of them because the extrapolation for the surface creation in between the points will kind of like be flat. So you don't need to worry too much about that. And there's another part over here that I'm going to ignore. And then just create like another point over here at this elevation. Okay. So when I hit confirm, now my surface is created over there. And you guys can see that I have a shape that follows the shape of my ramp, right? So there are areas that I didn't place a point over here, as you can see, that the software kind of like connected these 2 points on the out part. So like this is something that you need to pay attention to, because even though you don't have the points on these areas, if you create a cut over there, it will still follow that reference surface, right? This is kind of like something that we need to create to have like a proper bounding box over those points. Cool. So now, if I bring back my terrain and I take away my, actually, I'm not going to take away my model. I'm going to keep my model over there because I'm going to go ahead and create a cut over here. And I'm going to project shapes. I can project the shape of the ramp, for example. And then, as you can see, this will kind of like take that weird shape over there. Like the projections, they do not create like a circle. They create these several lines to represent the shape of the circle, of the arc. But then you can go over here and say, I want to cut this to that reference surface and put that to 0. And now I have a cut over there that is following the shape of my ramp. Cool. So this will help you a lot when creating these references, because it just makes your life easier. And who doesn't want to have their life made easier, right? So let's go ahead and I will bring back my model over here, and I'll finish this excavation with another cut. Actually, I'm going to duplicate the other cut that I already have, because this cut is already referencing the surface. So like it's easier if I just duplicate it instead of like doing the same thing all over again. And then I duplicate that cut, add it to sketch, click redraw, and then I can project the other shapes over here and over here. But as you can see, if I start projecting shapes, like every part of the model is a separate geometry. If I start projecting them and I don't understand that like they are not merged, like I will get this warning over here saying that I cannot create multiple cuts in the same sketch. This is gonna change very soon, by the way. For people that were in the SitePlan Summit, we did talked about that. So for the other people, little FOMO for you. Okay, so I will go ahead and create that. And then if I hide my thingy over there, you can see that I'm starting following the shape of that cut. And just to finalize the whole thing, I'm gonna create another cut over there that is for the bulk excavation. Could I have done this all in one single cut? Yes, I could have like simply drew this whole shape in one single cut and then use that to cut the whole thing. But if you want to divide that staging of your excavation in different milestones, this might be a little bit easier. So usually the slab on grade shapes are very weird, just like this one, as you can see over here. So I will simplify this by simply deleting all of these lines and trimming this line with this line, and that's it. Okay. And I will extend this part over here that it interacts with the other cut, just so we won't have like a little sliver of dirt over there. Cool. So now, again, if I hide my model, this whole cut that follows the shape of my excavation was created very, very fast and very easily, right? So any questions happening on the chat over there that I'm not seeing?
Yep. So we have a question about whether you're able to offset the excavation from the basically surface or geometry that you're creating it off of, in this case, the ramp.
Like offset to make it like a little bit larger? Yeah, like any shape you can do that. But keep in mind that if I do this right now, uh, if I don't have a surface, like this is using the reference surface as a reference. If this uses surface 4 as a reference. But if I don't have like a proper shape created for the surface on this area and I expand this, like we will use, it either will not cut like I showed here before, or it will create a cut using this kind of like extended area here as a reference, right? So you can do that, but just make sure that you have a surface to support below that extended area. Like, so for example, if I go over here and edit the sketch, I can take this whole sketch and offset it by clicking on this offset tool, and then I can click on this and bring it outwards and put in like I want to offset this cut by zero point 0.5 meters, you know. But like this area that was done afterwards over here, it's following the shape of the surface that I did not put a point on. Okay. So just one thing to keep in mind, like if we look at here from above, you see that the my points are here, but this cut over here is kind of like an extended shape for that. In this case over here, it's not going to be too much of a hassle because like it's gonna just simply use like an expanded shape of that surface and it's not gonna deform it that much, but just something to keep in mind. Cool. Did I answer your question? If yes, give me a thumbs up. If no, just there you go. I got a
Yes, we
yes.
got a yes. Perfect. And then we have another question from Dan.
Yep.
And the question is, would it be possible to have the tool use the polyline or rectangle selectors or do a standard spacing grid? So instead of doing the points one by one.
To trace the model that was imported. Is that it?
To trace the model or to create the surface and the first use case that you showed?
What was the first
Like
use case for
instead of
the
placing,
for this existing topography?
yes,
Ah,
I
okay,
guess
okay.
in any use case, instead of placing points, and we're gonna,
Yeah.
allow users to bring in surfaces soon.
Yeah,
Or,
exactly. So the solution for that would be that we plan to have the ability for you to simply kind of like import this as a surface, and instead of placing points, you're gonna say follow that surface over there. Like I want to create a reference surface from this imported shape, and you don't need to place points. Cool. But if I'm not mistaken, Shane, if Shane is in the call, he can provide a little bit more. There you go. He says hi. He actually asked me this question the other day about like if this was something that would be relevant for us to have a tool that would automatically create a grid of points based on some rules. So he can give you more um, context on the messages over there. Are good, Nika? Can I move forward?
yes, sir. Let's do it.
Thank you. So next use cases that I want to show here today. Custom operations with blended slopes, both for a cut and a fill. This is an interesting because sometimes you want to do a cut or a fill, and like if you use the sloping tool that we already have and so on that you guys are already aware of, it kind of like creates the slopes for you automatically, and either the cut or the fill will have like a flat surface on the top or at the bottom of the cut, right? But if I want to create something like this where I have a, whoops, let me go back, go back once more. If I create like a fill like this, I can have a surface that I created from points, this guy here, where I place a point on the ground, right? On where I want my fill, my slope to end, like points over here, as you see it, these four corners, and then points on the top that will have like different elevations if I want to, like say these are all three elevations to create a flat top over there, but I could have like the fill with a slope and whatnot. And then you control where the fill's slopes will stop and then where the flat part of it will also be limited and so on and so forth, right? So to do something like this, you can go over here in the fill, Let me delete this cut. You can go into to create a fill. You can go over here and create a reference surface. And let's say that I want my fill to be delineated by these 4 points over here. And I want to place points like on this elevation, and I want this elevation to be, let's say, 3 meters high. And I can lock this elevation and say, okay, my fill will also go all the way up to here, and then up to here, and then up to here, right? And I forgot to place a point on this corner. So when I hit confirm, now that reference surface that I have over there, you might not be able to see it clearly, but like you see that the slopes are showing over there and the shape is very not uniform, right? So it creates a shape of a field. You can use this to create like stockpiles, for example. I want to delineate my stockpile by these many points, and like this is going to be the top of my stockpile, and so on. And when you create your fill, you can hit a fill, project the shape, hit confirm, filter surface, reference surface 2, and now, is that the reference surface that I want? Yes. So now when I turn this off, I have a fill over there that is very weirdly shaped, right? So this can help you a lot when you're creating like a lot of different earthwork operations. They're more complex and so on and so forth. Cool. So this is one use case where you can create fills and cuts like they're a little bit weird. And let me do another one now with just the cut. So if I go ahead and I create an earthwork here, let me push this fill very far on the timeline. And I want to do the same idea, but now with cuts. I can go over here and say I want to create my cuts delineated by these points, but I want you, my voice is really raspy. Give me 1 second, guys. There you go. It did not make any difference. So let's say if I want to put like a cut right now that also with a sloped bottom, but also controlling where the slopes will finish and be delineated. I can go over there and say, okay, I want to put this point over there. It's gonna be -3, and then I want also to place in another point, locking that elevation over there at -3 over here. But this one, I want to create a point that is going to be -6, and this one also will be -6. So now when I hit confirm, I have my reference surface over there. As you can see, it has a slope. It has a bottom, kind of like a sloped bottom over there. It has a sloped walls. And then I can go over there in my earthwork, cut, same idea. Project this guy, and then hit confirm. Follow that shape. Offset is 0. There you go. And then I have now my cut over there that has a bottom surface, right? So a sloped surface at the bottom. Something that a lot of people have requested, and I think that this tool can really solve all of those problems, right? So you don't need to create this with a slope. If you just wanted to make sure that you had the bottom part sloped in a way, you could create a cut. You could create just the surface for the slope, for the bottom shape, and ignore the wall slopes. And then when you create a cut, it will be like a straight cut on the walls, but following the reference surface at the bottom. Okay, there you go. So very interesting use case, solving a lot of problems over there. And another problem, create curved ramps. So a lot of people request the ability of creating curved ramps. And I think that maybe in the future we'll be able to create a tool specifically for this. But for now, you can create a surface that would represent that curved ramp, and then you create a fill or a cut towards that ramp, right? So let's say that in this case over here, if I, just to make it easier for us, I'm gonna adjust this cut and I'm gonna make this sketch be a little bit smaller. So we will ignore that, that, the slopes on the side over there. And let's say that I wanted to create a sloped ramp coming like this way, right? Starting over here and then curving in inside. So I will go ahead, same idea, create a like reference surface, put in 8 points, and I say, okay, my starting of my ramp is going to be over here. And then I want to kind of like that ramp should be maybe like halfway over here, but I want to actually move this point this way. And I'm going to lock this elevation to place the same elevation over here. And then maybe I'm going to move this one down a little bit and then place it over here. And then I'm going to place in more points at the ground here and here. And in this kind of like broader part over here, I'm going to put in like a point maybe halfway of the elevation between those two. Something like that. I think that's halfway. And to make sure that I'll have like a slope on the sides of the ramps, I'm gonna go ahead and also placing like some points over here that are right on the ground, just to have like a control point of like where my slopes will be. Okay, so let's hit confirm. I got my surface over there creating that ramp, as you can see, and then very easily I can go in and add a fill, project the shape, hit confirm, follow the ramp, and then I got my curved ramp over there. So why is this important? A lot of people want to have these curved ramps very customizable because like you're gonna have like weird cuts all over your site. And also, we already have a curved ramp resource in the library, but the problem is that when you use that, you do not have the quantity takeoff of the ramp, like will be ignored, and also your animations for trucks coming in and out do not follow the resource shapes. This solves those two problems. Cool. Yes, cool, cool, cool. And another thing that we can also do is to create different soil profiles, right? So I will try to create like this very quickly because I'm seeing that I already spent 40 minutes talking about reference surfaces. So let's say that you have a report that shows your boreholes and things like that, and you know the elevation of different soil profiles, right? So I created 3 milestones over here, soil 1, 2, and 3, just to show 3 different soil profiles. So same idea. I'm going to go ahead and create my surface here. And I'm going to say, okay, I know that if I have projected a drawing that would show where the boreholes are, and then you can go in and use, let's say, like a report like this one that would show like the different elevations of your different soil profiles and so on. You can come here and place the points on exactly where the boreholes are and say, okay, at the -2 elevation, I'm going to have a specific type of soil. But over here is going to be -2.5. And over here is going to be -2.7. And over here is going to be -3. Okay. And this is going to be soil 1. Soil 1. Right now, I have like that surface created over there, just like all the other ones. But instead of doing the exact same thing all over again, then place the same points and so on and so forth, to create the other soil profiles, what I'm going to do is I'm going to export the CSV file because the coordinates of the points will be the same, right? It's the same borehole. So I will export that CSV, and then I'm going to go over here and create a new surface point points, import that CSV, and then once those points are placed over there, I just need to change the elevation of the different profiles over here. So this one's going to be -4. This one's going to be minus 3.5. This is going to be minus blah, 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 3.5 as well. And this is going to be -4, right? And that one's going to be my soil 2. And the last one, just so we can finish this example, I would do that very quickly, and I'm gonna create another soil 3, and this is gonna be, I don't remember the other values that I put, so I'm gonna put everything into -6 that I think was the lowest point for everything, and -7 on this one. Okay, so now I have like all of those 3 surfaces created over there, and then I can go and create my cuts showing that. But the interesting part of this part, the interesting point of this part is to create different colors so you can identify them, right? So I can make this the soil, and then to represent the different soil types, I will go over here and I will create, just change the color of the walls, right? So the wall is green, and then I can now hide all of these guys, and then on the next milestone, I can go ahead and duplicate this cut. It's going to be the same shape of the cut, right? But there is only one thing, is that for the people that already used cmBuilder in the past, you're going to remember that we used to have a problem with like coplanar surfaces when you're doing cuts that are sharing the same wall specifically, right? So this is happening for this type of operation with the soil, with the terrain surfaces, right? So this color over here is weird because of that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna bring this second cut a little bit towards the interior of the cut. So I'm gonna make an offset of 1 centimeter, like inwards, so those 2 cuts are not sharing the same surface. And then I have that coloring part over there going on. And then same idea on the next one. And I'm gonna edit the sketch, do also like a minor offset over here so they are not sharing the same wall. Change this to soil 3, different colors. Bada bing, bada boom. I got my representation of soil profiles over there following my boreholes. Okay. And an extension of this use case is for you to show a water level reference. So let's pretend that one of these soil profiles over here is like a water level. So you can have this turned on so you can see how your water level will impact your cuts and so on. Again, just the idea of using this as a reference for your profiling. Woo, okay, that was a lot about excavations, terrain surfaces. I hope you
You're on
guys
a roll there.
leverage a lot of value out of this. But is there any pending questions over there?
You were cooking, so I didn't want to stop you with questions, but we have a question about basically creating multicolor excavations, which I believe which is what you showed.
Yep.
So there's a, I guess, question earlier on, looking at your presentation slides. Then another one that we have, which Shane answered, maybe we just can add to the answer a little bit, is if we already have topography data developed in another platform like Civil 3D, can that be imported into cmBuilder and used directly? If so, what file formats and workflows are supported? Shane answered this, but what I would add, and then you add on top of it, or correct me, Pedro, is it's different for Google Maps and Mapbox, correct?
Yes. So in that case, the main aspect over there is like right now for Google Maps, you can only bring in things as a point, right? So for Mapbox, you can already bring it and as a surface, and this is covered in other workshops. But using this process for a Civil 3D model, you will need to export points from the Civil 3D. There is a way to do that. I haven't yet completely cracked that way, but you would need to export a CSV table containing X, Y, and Z coordinates for those points that will be geolocated. And when you import that CSV, it will represent like the points and create the surface in the correct spot over here. Is that it?
I believe we got it. Yeah, I believe that answers
Okay.
it. But please let us know in the chat if there's a follow-up.
Cool. So I will show quickly here the we only have like a few minutes, so I'm thinking, okay, I'll cover the massing as quick as possible. So massing multi-domain. What is the main gist over here is that you can now create more complex shapes for massing because you can create multiple geometries inside of the same sketch when you create a massing. The same way that I explained for zones in the past, you can now apply to massing, right? So what are the use cases? Is to create, for example, multiple towers in the same sketch. So if I am going over here and let me go ahead and create a fill here just to kind of like take this whole cut out, right? So if I create a massing here now, and I'm not going to use a drawing, I'm just going to randomly draw something over here. So if I create a massing, now I can create a massing that, let's say this is going to be the shape of the amenity levels, like the podium levels, and I'm going to create a massing with training levels, right? But I want the, like from level 6 and upwards, I want to change that into two different towers. So I can edit the massing element going to the sketching tool and then hit confirm. And then from here, I can go in and say, I want to create an offset that would represent one of the towers over here. Let's say that will be this shape. And I want to create another offset that would represent the other tower here. That would be, I don't know, this shape. And I don't need the outer lines anymore. So now when I hit confirm, inside of the same sketch, I have these two towers, right? Keep in mind that if you create your massing like this, the different towers, like the different levels, will all be combined. So if you change colors, if you change the height, if you change the connection to the timeline, will be applied to both levels. If you want them to be separated, you have to create a massing for one and a massing for the other one. This is just a quick way for you to create the massing all into one single shape, okay? Also, now the massing, you can create holes, right? So openings for courtyard, stairs, and elevator cores. So if I use the same massing over here, let's say this one at the bottom, and while I'm editing the sketch, I create another shape that is completely inserted in this one over here. This will create an opening. So it has the outer line, but if I create another one that is exactly inside, all inside, it will create an opening. So this way you can create your courtyards and so on and so forth. And let's say that I want to do, I don't know, like a stair core for these guys over here and an elevator core, I can go in and create like openings on these guys, and you have like your openings for the massing over there. So this, it's something that people have requested for a long time, and we finally be able to do it. So please leverage this so we can justify all the effort that we had to create these for you. And one that is like very interesting, it resonates with like another workshop that I did a few months ago, is that you can also create more complex shapes to create walls and floor plans very quickly. So if I hide this guy over here and I go into this shape, and again, I'm going to create this as quick as possible so we can save some time. Let's say that, actually, I already have this done. Why am I showing this, creating this from scratch? So like this massing here, for example, using the floor plan of our SitePlan Summit, kind of like event that we did where, right? So if I create this mass in here and I'm tracing that floor plan. So what I did here, it was that I created the outer walls in one line, and then I created like other lines to create the opening spaces. And what is left is just the walls itself, right? So you create the outer part, the perimeter of the external of the shape, and then you create the openings, the removal shapes inside of that to create the rooms and the ambience and so on. And then you got something like this, all connected in one single object. And then if I want to go crazy and add more stories over here, I could do something like that. And then if I want to go even crazier, I can say, for example, in this one over here, I want to redraw this, and I want to basically just create the outline. And I'm gonna do this quickly, guys. It's not gonna look perfect, but let's go just on the outline. I can do something like that, and then say this story over here is actually something like this. And then now I have like an actual floor plan with a typical levels going on over here, right? So this is something that I think that a lot of you will appreciate, because a lot of times you don't have a model to work with, and you can now go into a higher level of detail when you're creating your buildings. Cool. La la la. Okay, cool. So partial editing updates. Mentioned this on the previous workshop, that multiple people can be editing the same scenario at the same time, and now we are constantly adding more features that can be edited in multiplayer mode. So just recently we added callouts, labels, and maskings to this list. So you now can, if you hover over here on partial editing, you can see what are the objects that can be edited simultaneously by multiple people in the same scenario, right? Zones, 3D lines, labels, callouts, and maskings can be edited by multiple people at the same time. Cool. Give it a try. Let us know how's it going. And then in terms of tips and tricks, night mode, right? So someone have asked, like a few people have asked about night mode in the past, and we don't have yet a tool that turns things into night mode like in per milestones, but we do have ideas, crazy ideas. And one of these ideas that I had was to create a resource that looks like a dome like this, and the name of the resource is Night Sky Effects. So when you place this resource, and thanks Going for doing that for us, basically it looks like a big dome like this, and then you can change the size of that dome and whatnot. Looking from the out part, looks like a sphere in Las Vegas, but if you go inside, you're gonna get like a kind of like a night mode effect that you can connect to one milestone, right? So I can go over here, and this will look like night, but it's very important that if you're using this, that you make sure that you have your ground shadow turned on, because if you turn it off, you're just gonna change the sky, but the color of the elements will remain the same, so it doesn't look really like night. And on the display function over here, you can play with the environmental lighting to change a little bit the colors of the interior objects of this night mode. Okay. So this is things one. Thing two is facade walls and buildings. We have added a resource to our library that are represents like facade walls, so like some generic facade like this, right? So these are wall resources. So if you go into the resource library and you go into building elements, exterior envelope, we have these facade shells. We have 4 of these that you can test, and basically you can create them as a polyline like you see over here. You can project the shape of your massing and so on, and then this you can adjust the height of that element that will cover your whole massing over there, and you can create like different shapes of facades if you want. And also you can add these elements as a resource, like a point-based resource. If you go over here in site conditions, and the same kind of like texture, we have like them in the form of actual buildings, and then you can place them either as a point, like a building like this, or you can, if you want to build like a background kind of like of buildings, you can just put them as a line, and I can make a spacing over here, let's say 60-meter spacing between these buildings and something like that, right? So you can, of course, this is just if you are not working with Google Maps, or if you want to, for some reason, create these generic shapes of buildings on your view. Cool. Coolio. Awesome. So this is it for tips and tricks. There's one last tips and tricks over here that I want to show, is that a lot of you already knew that we could do math in these operation fields, right? So if I'm creating a massing over here, and I say that I want this story height over here to actually be 3 meters times 2 plus 10 minus blah, 25. This, Jesus, did I came back to the exact same number? That was very weird. Okay, so I can go ahead and put in like some operations in here that will like solve that operation and give me the result. But one thing that not a lot of you knew is that if you're working on meters, but you want to use feet as an example, I can just put in like 10 feet over here, FT. And when I hit enter, this converts the value for me automatically. So use that, let us know how it works, and so on and so forth. Coolio. And the last thing is some general notes. It's about SitePlan Summit, right? So it was a blast. A lot of you came to the event. We had a lot of fun. Javi had his opportunity to flex his muscles over there and take this picture over there. And we would love to hear more feedback from you guys about like how this was, like what is that was that went well, what could be improved, but just to show just people like what we had over there. We had keynotes over there, like a lot of great presentations. We had panel discussions. We had awards. There were partner booths over there where different exhibitors were showing their products as well. cmBuilder booths where like we were hearing first time the feedback about tools that are to come. Like we are showing mock-ups, showing like prototypes of new tools, and also like demoing things that we created like recently that some people didn't know, right? So this was a very interesting interaction for us, because to get that feedback in real time, like understanding how you guys use tools, is amazing. A lot of networking as well, right? So, but we also had sunshine in Vancouver. It was amazing to have like a party over there, people mingling in the patio. We had food, we had drinks. We filmed the Kid Feature Friday over there. Shane made a lot of promises, and we can hold him accountable to all of that. And there was music, right? So live music was there. I didn't put my picture over here of me playing because that would be a weird flex as well. So I just let that go. Okay, cool. So let us know how you feel about the event, and that's it. Whew, I finished the whole thing with 1 minute to spare. Ah, yes. Cool.
We're really on a
Okay.
roll there.
Questions from the team? Thanks a lot. I think that this is it. And let us know about new features that you guys want to see, and also things that you want me to cover in the workshop. I will gladly put them on the list. Go.
That was a banger. Good job, man.
See you all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.